I would like to say a few words about the ALDE group in the European Parliament. It is generally assumed that the ALDE group, the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, is a typically liberal group ideologically, but I would think that it's not the case, because for instance, all the actions, besides the element that democracy and democratism and liberalism are not always on the same page. For instance, we can very well imagine non-democratic government who is more liberal than a democratic alternative. It was the case, for instance, with the Arab Spring, when the non-democratic governments were replaced by democratic alternatives, and the result was that the power was taken largely by radical groups, which were democratic but very radical socially, radical groups connected with Muslim Brotherhood, which is both radical and democratic and very illiberal socially, and the result was very appalling and essentially not very liberal. So if you combine liberalism and democratism in one party and assume that it's all the same and it's always mutually intelligible, it's a common mistake. It's not the case. What you have in ALDE group, you basically have a group which is Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe. So it's basically the most important element in this name is for Europe, and Democrats maybe, but mostly for Europe. We can see it very clearly when we observe how the ALDE group is, what is the attitude of ALDE group towards the political developments in Europe. For instance, if you have, for instance, a government of Mr. Silvio Berlusconi, it was almost universally judged by the members of European Parliament for ALDE group. This government of Berlusconi was judged as very regressive, very anti-liberal, and so on and so on. But in the same time, and of course it was populistic, and they were, to some extent, they were right that Mr. Berlusconi was essentially making many promises that he couldn't really keep, alongside those who he could keep and which he kept. But in the same time, Mr. Berlusconi has made many liberal changes, very effective changes in the Italian politics. For instance, he has lowered taxes, and lowering taxes is a very liberal thing to do, and it's also a smart thing to do. And he lowered taxes both for middle class and for small and big companies. So it's not the case like for instance a socialist politician like Macron, who lowered taxes only for big enterprises, but totally forgot about middle class, especially lower middle class. So Mr. Berlusconi is far more liberal than Macron, but Macron, ALDE would have no problem with Macron, has no problem with Macron. Why? Because ALDE group is not really liberal, it's essentially radically pro-European Union. And the whole ideology of ALDE group starts and ends with European Union. We can observe also that they are not at all democratic when they criticize, for instance, the Lega Nord. Lega Nord is the Italian political party that stood until recently for regionalism, for autonomy, if not separation, of the northern Italy, which the members of Lega Nord perceived as more progressive, more liberal, and so on. They wanted to separate it from the southern Italy, which was seen as archaic and communist in the same time. It's not really surprising, but but they later switched to Italian nationalism, because they saw an inefficiency of the European Union and so on. So they really stuck to their plan and their political agenda, and they were consistent. But the ALDE group totally quarreled with them when they switched from regionalism and pro-Europeanism, if something like this word exists, I don't know, switched from being very pro-European Union to Italian nationalism. The attitude of the ALDE group completely changed. If it were really an alliance of liberals for Europe, they would pay attention to ideological differences and similarities. They would be pro-Lega Nord, even if they were not really pro-European Union anymore. But they changed that attitude when the pro-European Union element was thrown out. So we really see that the ALDE group is not really liberal. It's mostly European centralist. It's mostly pro-European Union, not pro-European. I don't like the word pro-European, because what European means and what European Union means, this confusion is often used by the European Union propaganda. Because Switzerland and Norway are not in European Union, but they are also European countries. Ukraine, Belarus are also European countries. Even Russia has its European part. So saying pro-European is mostly a propaganda mechanism to embarrass the people who are just seeing some flaws in the pan-European, in the European Union project. We also could observe how not really liberal the ALDE members are when their boss, that is Mr. Verhofstadt, who represents the ALDE group in the European Parliament and is its leader, was conducting talks with the British about the Brexit, about the deal, the parting deal. I know that the British were carrying this deal mostly inefficiently and not very professionally, because I could presume they want to have no deal, but they cannot do it openly. They prefer to go without a deal. And I think personally it's better than having a deal, because Ms. Theresa May has negotiated a deal. It's a little bit a separate problem here, but they wanted to leave the European Union, but they couldn't make it openly that okay, we're leaving without a deal. The UK has plenty of economical options of growth and outside of European Union. It's no discussion here. They can join the Anglosphere. They can join. They can engage in more trade with the US, with Australia, with Canada, with India, with many different parts of the world, without being restrained by European Union and its Commission regulations and limitations. For instance, as one of the ministers of Hungary justly observed, the European Union was unable from 2007 on to negotiate as a whole European Union with anyone a successful trade deal. So European Union is not really very effective. Okay, but leaving all this behind, we can also observe that from the part of Mr. Verhofstadt, the former Belgian Prime Minister, who represents and who is the leader of the ALDE group in the European Parliament, we could observe very illiberal, very anti-liberal attitude towards the British. I personally think that he was chosen to negotiate the parting deal with the British, the Brexit deal with the British, because he has an he's the only important person in the European Parliament who really speaks good English, who is not English and speaks a very good English, and who is also as a sort of liberal, even if he's not really liberal. The the ALDE group they are not social democrats because they know something about economy. Basically, what prevents people from becoming Christian Democrats or Social Democrats is some knowledge, some understanding of economy. The people who understand economy are basically liberals of some sort. There are many types of liberalism, and because liberal is a person who wants a liberal outcome, a liberal society, but how to make the society liberal. There are many different approaches. You can, for instance, claim that unlimited migration is what makes society in the world more liberal. So no walls, just no illegal migration, make all migration legal. Okay, but you also, it would be the case if the migrants were not transporting, for instance, to Europe and the United States some very dangerous ideologies like radical Islamic approach to social life, like Sharia and so on. We all know what is going on. So if it was not the case, if it weren't the case, this unlimited migration would be something formidable, and it would be if the migrants were only Vietnamese, Hindus and so on, essentially people who assimilate very well. But it's not the case. So you can also argue that as a liberal, I am against massive immigration from Islamic countries, for instance, because the people who immigrate to the West are not liberal, and they are not contributing to our liberal societies, they are not contributing to our Western liberalism, they are acting against it. And what I see in the ALDE group is also not liberal approach, because they are not even discussing this. They are totally for massive immigration, also from Islamic countries, and because there's a geographic proximity between the European Union and the Islamic world, this migration would be first and foremost Islamic. So they are basically for massive Islamic migration to Europe. So it's not very liberal, and having no discussion even about it, it's not very liberal. There are real liberals in the European parliaments, but they are not in the ALDE group. Maybe some are also in the ALDE group, but they are totally hushed by the majority, which is basically pro-European and perceive everything what European Union does as good. Of course, there are some liberals. I think there must be some liberals there. Some real liberals, but mostly they are just Eurocrats. And you can find, I think, more real liberalism, liberals, on the right wing of the Christian Democratic Party of the European People's Party. And some liberals you can also find in the Eurosceptic groups. The one which is for more, oh my God, for this, for the one in which the Mr. Farage and the Cinque Stelle from Italy is, and the one which is clearly and openly Eurosceptic. You can find some real liberals both in those groups, in those more Eurosceptic groups of European Parliament. You can also find some liberals in the European People's Party, of course. But not so much in ALDE group. ALDE group is mostly pro-European Union, not so much pro-liberal. So when you see Mr. Verhofstadt bullying the British and using all the leverage he could, and trying to still have some influence over British politics, to overthrow the result of Brexit referendum, and so on, you can see it clearly that he is no liberal. He has been a liberal in the sense of everyday life when he was the Prime Minister of Belgium. He introduced gay marriage. He didn't introduce the gay marriages, but he make the path to introduce gay marriage. He also changed this what was described by the medieval customs of 20th century Belgium towards the things like abortion, euthanasia, and so on and so on. The real liberal would be for. I think the real liberals should leave the question about abortion to women. They should decide between themselves, because the pregnancy mostly affects women's life. About euthanasia, of course, people should be able to end their life in dignity, because it's a right of an individual. And it's good that he introduced these things. I am a liberal, but I'm also a liberal in this way, that I would expect the party which claims to be liberal to be real liberal, to appreciate the liberal reforms of Berlusconi, and not to squabble with him all the time about his populism, because all politics is populist. And if you just use television and social media and internet better, then you are automatically a populist. This is what it came to. So this is where we are now. That if the politician is just effectively using social media, he is automatically perceived as populist. That's, of course, contradictory promises that Berlusconi or Trump, for instance, made to the electorate. It's, of course, it's deplorable, but there are many. In every politician's program you can find some contradictory elements, some hyperboles to make a good impression. Also in the programs of the politicians who complain all the time about their more efficient colleagues, that is, populists, of course. So if you see that when we see that ALDE group is automatically against everything which is more skeptical towards European Union, and we can see it clearly when the attitude towards European Union changed among the ranks of Lega Nord, for instance, then the attitude of the ALDE group changed towards the Lega Nord. Then we can see that it's not a liberal party, it's only Eurocratic party.